Welcome, everybody. We're going to be working on an app build today called the Meme Maker, which is at the very end of the Apple Swift Explorations book. Um, just as kind of like a little note here for people watching the video, this is an app we didn't get to during the first semester, but we thought would be a great way to start out the second semester by getting this one done and kind of refresh our skills and all the procedures. This is kind of a silly little app. It's nothing really fantastic, but it teaches you a lot about interfaces, and you know what, you can have a little bit of fun with it as well. Um, and the other thing is I think it really does reinforce pretty well some of the things that you guys have learned. Um, you know, and it kind of I look at it as kind of like a culmination of all those skills, that we learned. Now, if you look at the little graphic that they have up on the screen here, we're going to build something that basically does this. We take silly photographs, put silly words in, um, and have an interface controls to control it all. Um, and hey, if you're clever, you might actually use it to create some memes. Who knows, right? And, not that there's not websites for that already, but you know how it goes. All right, so that's basically what it's going to end up looking like. And in terms of like what I'm putting up on the screen right now, by the way, this is the teacher version of the book. So it has a lot of like notes in it and stuff that the student version doesn't. Apple doesn't obscure the teacher's version, which I think is helpful, because I think it is more informative than this student version. Um, Now, the whole point of this is to build this app, and um, what they're trying to reinforce here. So, like in part one, and I was lecturing this to my Python students this morning, right? And mind you, it was a group of high school students, um, where I gave them my standard analogy of like, hey, if you want to build a house, you don't run to Menards and buy some 2x4s, hammer and nail, and start building. You need a plan, and that's what they're reinforcing here too. It says before you dive into making it, you have to think about what you're going to do, basically. So we have to have an image that's going to go in the middle, some options to put text in, which is going to go above the image, and then some sort of an emoji. So in other words, like you'll hit like an emoji, and then when you hit the emoji, that will put certain text into the meme, based on which emoji you select. And then you'll also have some options that will go below. So in other words, it'll kind of build the message depending on which emojis you tap, basically. Um, so above the image, we're going to basically do like, sunglasses, little explosion, and some hearts. And it could be anything else. Like, so if you have a different idea or inspiration, you go with it. But I'm going to follow what the book does. And then below the image, we'll have cats, dogs, and monkeys for whatever reason. Of course, if you want to have more options, you could always add those. That's not a big deal. But we're going to go with what they have. All right, so we're going to start by creating a new project. So let's go ahead and get that going. I do have Xcode already launched. So I'm going to go ahead and click create new Xcode project. And then some of this will be pretty normal. I am going to move the book content over to my other screen here, as long as my display doesn't fight me too much. And then I'll be reading off of that. Every once in a while, I'll pull it back over though. So it says create a new Xcode project using the app template. So we got the app template selected for iOS. All right. Once you got that selected, go ahead and click next. And then we are going to name it Meme Maker, or as my kids call it, Meme. No, I don't think they call it that anymore, but there was a time that we were like, what the heck is what is that? A meme? And you know what? Historically, it wasn't that long ago, by the way, which I find really fascinating. Um, of course, if you guys remember, this interface that we're using right now, um, there is an organization identifier here. So normally, what I recommend to people is that if you did work for an organization, they would tell you what to put here, right? So that the app's properly attributed. Otherwise, if you don't put anything in, it will automatically just do com example.meme maker. It's an example, whatever. You can also put in a dot and put in your name. I'm just going to kind of leave it as is. We are building on top of a storyboard, and that's kind of the general interface. There is this new thing, and we talked about this at my level 3 training called Swift UI, and this is one of the things I'm training on this week, by the way, is they're going to start showing us some of this stuff, which is the new way to do it, although it's not completely ready for prime time on many levels, and the storyboard stuff is still important. But when Swift UI is fully implemented, it promises to streamline a lot of the processes that we're already doing to make it even easier. So I think that's really exciting, except it does not work with like all APIs and libraries. So there's, you got to be careful with it. Basically, you got to know what you're doing is the recommendation. So stick with storyboard. Of course, we're doing it in Swift. And then I'm going to go ahead and click next. Right. For me, I'm still putting it back in my fall semester folder here with the other stuff. I'm just going to drop it in the root. I really don't care too much where it ends up. Keep in mind that all the files that you get from Apple, you can always go back and re-download them again. In fact, you might still have them in your downloads folder as a zip. So just keep that in mind. Another thing that we did in my level 3 training is we did start connecting up our code to GitHub. So some people were actually pushing the stuff to their GitHub repository. There's a couple little catches with this, though. And I think later in the course, we'll spend some time on this. First, you have to have a GitHub account, right? That's one thing. And then you have to get a developer key that you provide to Xcode that then connects your repository. So in other words, when you do a save, then it can save to your hard drive still, but it also propagates out to GitHub, and then you can do all the stuff you can do with GitHub, which is like forking it and sharing it and all those things. Professional programmers would almost exclusively work with online repositories like that. And in fact, they're if they had an employer, would probably insist on it. Right? One of the risks that you run by just putting it on a hard drive is, well, I'll give you an example. I was in the airport going through TSA, and they make you pull out your gear, like if you have a laptop or an iPad. And of course, so I left home with 2 laptops and an iPad and came home with 3 laptops and 2 iPads and all in one backpack, really, really heavy. And the TSA lady was really funny. She was like, boy, that's a lot of technology for one person. I'm like, I'm a professional is what I said. But very interestingly, I was pulling the stuff off the conveyor, and I had my actually this machine I'm using right now sitting on top of the pile, and it slid off the pile and slammed on the floor, and I swear it like echoed in the place, and everybody was like gasped. And the machine is just fine, by the way, but it really made a loud thud. So go ahead and click create if you haven't already. All right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to go right to the main storyboard. You can close this info screen if you wish. I'm going to X mine out and bring up the storyboard in the main view. And I'm going to expand my screen here a little bit. I'm not going to go completely full screen, but close. And now they just start giving us information. Now, keep in mind with the book, we kind of know what the app would look like when it's done, right? So it's like an image, 3 emoji icons above, 3 emoji icons below, basically, is the layout. So what they're telling us now in the instructions, right? They're assuming that you kind of get it at this point. So we'll see if we remember. They're saying, open the main storyboard, choose a late model iPhone. They're saying iPhone 13 Pro. I have 14 Pro on mine. When we were doing this at the training the other day, I think we were using 15 or 16 or 17. I forget what model we're up to now. And you can tell that means I don't own an iPhone. I still have an Android phone. I just don't want to pay money for a brand new phone, is what it is, right? Because I pay for everybody else's phones in the house. So, um, but now they're saying add the following items, placing them from top to bottom: a segmented control, a label, an image view, a label, and a segmented control. So, in that order from top to bottom. And don't worry about where the stuff gets placed because we will um, adjust it as we go. All right. So let's do that. So I'm just going to come up to the little icon here, right? If you guys remember this, this is your item library, the little plus sign. This is a little bit of a topic of discussion at my training too. Is like, is there a shortcut key for that? And nobody knew one. Um, and then somebody blurted it out, and I didn't write it down. So there is a shortcut key for this, and you could probably look it up, I'm sure. So first, let's find a segmented control. Once you have that, just drag that onto your interface. I'm just putting this kind of towards the top, keeping in mind that I can adjust this later, right? I just want to get it in there. Then we want to add a label. Oops. And there's my label. And then
that shortcut is Shift Command L.
Shift Command L. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
And you know what? I should probably test it. Shift Command L. There it is. All right. Then we want an image view. That's one of the first things we put in an app, if I remember right. So I'm just put that right in the middle. Then we want another label. Alignment's not really too critical right now, but I tend to try to center all the stuff I've discovered when I'm working with tools like this. And then another segmented control. Now, we can already tell this does not look exactly like what they're talking about. We're going to work on it. So it's going to be one thing at a time. All right. So the next thing it says is change the text of the top label to top. All right. So let's click on it. And then right up here in the properties inspector, right? That's what this is called. Right. Attributes inspector. All right. So that's one for the certification exam, by the way. See, I call it properties inspector because when I work in Visual Studio, for example, on a Windows side, it's properties, and most programming tools, it's properties. All right. So we're going to say top. And then the bottom label, I guess we'll call bottom. And for right now, this is just placeholder text that did uncenter stuff. So I'm kind of moving it a little bit. And they make a little point here, says we're going to be changing these in the code later, but this helps you to see your storyboard a little bit more clearly. All right. Next thing that we're going to do is we're going to work with these segmented controls. And first, let's kind of talk about what they are, right? So the book goes into this whole little thing about them. And basically, segmented controls are a way to offer your user a choice between just a few different options, right? The way that it's set up right now, it's set up for two options in each one of them. So that's nice, but that's only two options, right? Now they're giving an example here. It says a calendar app might have a segmented control to switch between day, week, and month views. And there's one that would have three options, right? But only one can be selected at a time. So like if you're looking at a calendar, electronic one, and if you use one, you know what I'm talking about. That's a really common thing. So like day, week, month, and in some calendars, like you can see the whole year at once as well, right? And that's kind of what these tools do. When it says when the user taps one of the segments, the value changed control event is sent. So that's the event handler that comes into play. And then you can access the index value of that event within the segmented control. So in other words, if I have, let's say, I don't know, 4 segmented controls, those would be 0, 1, 2, 3, right? Like if you think about the index values. So you do get index, which tells you that the controls really sit in an array structure of some sort that is indexed, or some indexed structure. Um, and then what we're going to do is when they click the different options, then it's going to change text in the labels as a result. That's how we're going to treat it. But the event handler is called value changed, if you're curious. Now, we need to add an image to our thing, and it's kind of like making us recollect that very first app that we built, the photo frame thing. So we need to find one to add, and we probably want something that's kind of goofy, or silly looking in some way. Um, and I'm really tempted to kind of look, find a silly picture of myself. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to pause the video from recording. We'll take a break, give us some time to look for some images, and then when we reconvene, we'll each have an image, and then we'll drag it into the project. So video is going to get paused here. All right, we took a little break and we all located images and stuff that we're going to use. And if you're curious, somewhere here, I have my silly picture of a sheep that I grabbed off the internet somewhere. This is only for academic purposes, so I'm not using it to make money, by the way. If it's copyrighted by somebody, I apologize. I did not do a deep dive on making sure it wasn't. Really, you guys should always check that stuff. But we do get a pass for academia. Just don't try to make money on it. Is really the thing. I figured this one, this is one of those that I could picture a lot of different stuff, memeable that goes on top of this. So I thought that was a good image. All right, so now we need to get this image into our assets area in the app. So you'll want to click here. And there's a bunch of different ways to do this too, but for me, kind of like the easiest way is just to kind of do this. I'm just going to drag and drop. Oops, name change. All right, fumbling with I've been working on the PC too much today. Is what's going on, and I forget. So here's what's happening to me right now. If you guys want to put it in context, on a PC, you can tap on the pad, right? Now you just tap lightly. On these MacBooks, you have to actually press, but then they have 2 levels of tap on these pads on these new ones, right? So there's the regular tap and then the deep tab, and I'm pressing too hard is what's going on. So I'm just dropping that sheep right in there, and now it should be available. I did also make sure in advance of putting it in here that it was named in a way that was easy to remember and easily typed out. So funny-sheep.png is pretty easy. I do also want to make note that when I found this on the internet and did the right click save as, it did download as a WebP file extension, which is one of those new formats they're trying to push for the web. What I've discovered in previous work is that often you can change it to whatever its true native image format is. And in this case, I guessed it was a PNG, and it worked, right? So if I double click that, it opens up just fine. So I changed the extension to PNG, no problem, no problem at all. All right, so we've got it dragged in. Now we're going to go to the image view. So we want to go back to the main storyboard here, and you can select the image view here on the sidebar if you want. I mean, that's a fine way to do it, or you can select it on the storyboard. Either way works. And we want to drag in our image. So we should be able to just come here to the assets at this point, select the funny sheep, and you see how it's dropping in. And then it says, select the image and choose the aspect fit mode in the attributes inspector. So down here, it's already set for aspect fit. Now, one thing that you guys should kind of keep in your head here is when I think about a meme, I always think of memes as being square, right? And typically that's what you see, and that you can thank social media for that partially. But you can see that the image view I dropped in is very rectangular. So what I am going to do is I'm going to resize it, and you can see it brings up a width and a height there, and I'm trying to get it like mechanic, like with my mouse, and you know what, it's not really working too well. The resize. So what you can do is with the image view selected, you can come up here to this icon, right, which is the size inspector, and you can actually manually set the width and the height to specific values. Now, we have a lot of screen real estate here. My advice would be to make it bigger rather than smaller. So I'm going to go with like 250 by 250. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, maybe a little bigger. Let's go a little bigger than that. Let's try 300. Might be a good number. And then I'm going to recenter this on the screen. Now you can see my labels are being a little problematic. So I'm just going to move them out of the way for now. Eventually, those will actually end up on top of the image. Like if you guys, um, you know, didn't think of it that way. Now, I'm going to go back to the attributes inspector, and I'm still set here for aspect fit, but that might not be your best option, by the way. So you might want to experiment a little bit with these settings. So for example, if I do scale to fill, okay, well now I'm seeing some stretching. Don't like it, by the way. That's not good. So let's try aspect fill. Right, that's a little better. You guys see the difference there? So it's not skewing the photograph, but it's filling the frame. I think that looks pretty good, actually. I think that's a nice layout. So that's the one I'm going to choose. There's no arbitrary one that you must choose here. Pick the one that works best. And you know what? It depends on what image you're starting with. So if you're starting with a square image, you wouldn't have to worry about it too much. You could also take whatever image you find and make it square to begin with, so that when you do the what was the original selection aspect fit, it would get in there and take up as much space as possible. And if it's already square to begin with, it would just fill the screen, or fill the image view is really the right way to say it. All right. Now we're in this step now here on page 601 in the teacher's guide that says finishing the layout. And it says make sure that all your elements are centered on the canvas by using the blue guides that appear as you drag them. So let's just do that really quickly because there's steps that follow this. So I just did that with this image, but there's the guide. Top and bottom, I think, are already centered. Right, there's center. Right, we want it centered on the screen, not centered to each other. There you go. So see the difference between the two? When you center to the whole screen, the blue line goes from top to bottom. So make sure you do that. And then take this control and this control, and it looks like we're all good. So they're all centered. All right. So here they're making this little point, and I was just kind of reading it in the back of my mind here. It says one classic meme style dating from the I Can Has days, like that was like a lifetime ago, uses white all cap block letters on top of an image. So it says move the two labels so that they're over the top and bottom of the image. If either one of them disappears when you do that, we'll have to move them forward in the layout. So we'll address that if it is an issue. But I'm just going to pull this down, and it looks, see, I'm using my arrow keys to move it around. It looks like it is behind, but the bottom one isn't. Now, there's a reason for that, right? Why? It's because of the order in which they're added, right? And so the top label was added before the image view. So the image view, if you're thinking of it as kind of like a layered view, is on top of top. But then the bottom was added after the image, so it's on top of the image. Right? And that's why the one's behind and one's not. All right. So what they're saying here is um, if one or both disappear under the image view, you'll have to move them in the document outline. Both labels should be below the image view in the outline. So this is kind of I guess, a learning point here, right? So top, if I move that down here, now you can see it. See the difference? So that's a really helpful thing. So in other words, there is a layering that happens automatically with this stuff, and then knowing how to work it will help. All right. All right. So now they're saying use the attributes inspector to adjust the following settings for each label. So first thing that we want to do, and you can see that I have now you can be clever about this, and let me tell you what the clever thing is. You can select both of these labels at the same time. So you can control click and select them both and make the settings in one fell swoop. So in other words, top is selected right now. I could command click. I said control, but I meant command. And I could select them here or on top of the storyboard. And now whatever changes I make will apply to both. Or you can do each one separately to just have the repetitive practice. Either one is fine. All right, so let's go ahead and set the alignment. So I have both of them selected, and I'm going to select the alignment to center. All right, so there it is, centered. Set lines to 0. So right now, lines for me is set to 1. So we're going to set that to 0. Now, interestingly, that doesn't make sense, right? So normally what this does is it says how many lines of text you can have, right? So if I want 2 lines or 3 lines of text, but if I set it to 0, then it's not limited. It can be whatever it wants to be. So that's what that setting does. Then it says using the font control up here, set the font to custom. So let's start by doing that. And then the family, they're using Avenir Next Condensed. That is this one. Okay, Avenir Next Condensed. Set the style to heavy. That means it's bold. And the size to 30. And I'm just going to type mine in, but you can use the up down arrows. All right. So now they're a little bit bigger. All right. So the next step is there's an auto shrink control, and I'm looking at my screen right now. Oh, there it is, right here. And it says to minimum font size. Okay. And the value should be 15, which it already is. And what this does is it says the label will wrap its text automatically to fit its width. If there's too much to fit at 30 points, it will reduce the font to as small as 15 points to make it fit. That's what this control does, right? So the auto shrink, we're setting the threshold for how small the font can be, basically. All right, set the color to white color. It's near the bottom of the pop-up menu. So the color is up here, and then you have to come down here and choose white color. There's white. And then it says find the shadow control, which is in the middle of the screen here. And first of all, set it to black. I think that looks like black, but if you're not sure, choose black color. And then we are setting up basically a shadow here. So we want to have an offset for the shadow and a height. So the offset width is going to go to 3. You can see it change on the screen as you're doing this, by the way. And then the height was going to go to 2. All right, so there you go. Almost looks like a meme already. You guys doing okay?
Mhm.
I want to say yes. I'm just same issue as last time. The picture went to JPEG. Trying to make it to PNG right now.
Oh, if you downloaded a JPEG, leave it a JPEG. Don't change it.
Oh, okay. Because
Yeah,
all
yeah.
right.
The reason I changed mine, just to kind of reinforce that, is when I downloaded it from the web, the file extension was WebP, which is a new format. But what I've discovered is if you can figure out what their native format is, and you usually guess, it's usually, you know, JPEG, PNG, or GIF, right? It's one of those
Yeah.
three. You just change it to what it would be, and then it would work. I don't think that WebP natively works here within at least this version of Xcode. Maybe that's one of the upgraded things. You would hope, right? You know, if a web browser could show it, why shouldn't an app building tool show it? Is kind of my thinking. All right. Um, so now it says now that the labels are configured, we can resize them both so that they're as wide as the image and tall enough to fit 2 lines of text. Um, and that should probably be a good default setting. So in other words, you can resize them a few different ways here. So probably the easiest way to do it is just, you know, keeping in mind that the centering, the font, and all that will happen automatically. So I'm making it as wide as the image, and I'm speculating on the height, you know, so something like that should probably be okay. Um, right, and then that can actually slide up. Right, and then do the same with the bottom. So I'm just grabbing the handles, dragging to the edge of the image and letting it lock in place, and then raising the bar, if you will, ever so slightly, so it sits like that. Now you won't really truly know if it fits 2 lines of text until you put in 2 lines of text, right? All right. So now we got to get to the coding part of it, and we need to start connecting stuff together, right? So this is where we'll do our control drags. And then I just kind of want to remind you guys, like, well, if we're working from the interface and we want to drag from the interface over to the code, what's really helpful is if you set up a split screen kind of setup here. Um, so this is one of these like training things that reinforce, like I would always like struggle with that little piece. But then I discovered that all you have to do here is you find the thing that you want to um, put on the screen. You see, I just clicked it, right? And it just pops up on the screen. But if you option click it, then it opens up in another view. One strategy I was using a lot during my training is that, you know, like sometimes it's easier if the storyboard's on the left or on the right, or like which order you prefer to work in, right? Um, and what I was doing a lot of is I would open all the different things I need in both views, and that way I had them available, you know. So like, hey, the storyboard would be better here for now, and the controller's better over there for later or whatever. And you know, and you can drag a couple different ways. So in other words, I can click the item here and then drag from the item over to the code, or, and I'm going to give you this idea here, you can also, and I'm doing an option click here, put the storyboard on the other side, right? And then drag the other direction if you want to drag from the outline, right? And in some cases, I think it's easier to drag from the outline than it is from the actual storyboard. And that's a preference, right? Um, I do have a mouse sitting here in front of me. I don't even have it turned on. You know, I'm trying to do everything with the touchpad right now. And like I said, I was in Windows mode all day up until this class started. So like I'm trying to like break those Windows mindsets on doing the drags here. All right, so we're going to make outlets for the segmented controls. So let's do those one at a time here. So first, find the segmented control. If you're not sure which one it is, you can click it and then it'll highlight first, second, and first, second. So this is a segmented control and this is a segmented control. What is a really good habit, and the guy that was training us always does this, right? He always does this mark thing. So he labels the sections of his code. And he does it as a matter of habit, but it has some benefits to it, right? That you can organize your stuff and you know what you're looking at. And as a general rule, at least in my training, we would always put the outlets at the top. And then we add, if we have IB actions, we usually put them either here or below, but we also mark view did load. Usually we just abbreviate VDL for that one. And then what I also like to do is just make a little bit of space for myself. So let's go ahead and start dragging those in. I'm going to grab the first segmented control. This is a control drag, by the way. And you can kind of be strategic about this and set it up so that things are as close as possible and that your code area is not like down here while, you know what I mean? So like the spot where you're dropping it is in here. So you're dragging all the way across the screen, get them so it's like the easiest drag possible. That's kind of my recommendation. So let's grab the first one. This is going to be an outlet. And
this is a control click?
What's that? It's control click. Yeah, control click. Okay. Not option, not command, but control. So control click. Make sure that connection is an outlet. And the name they want us to use is top segmented control. Right, for the first one. Everything else can be left alone. And I think my Xcode just crashed. Okay. Well, there we go. Record it and put it on the internet. There was, there was a little bit of discussion during training too about this propensity for Xcode to crash. And we were finding some correlations as to why. And I'm not going to pick on Google Chrome, but I'm picking on Google Chrome a little bit right now. That one thing we noticed during class time is that Google Chrome was almost always open when Xcode quit unexpectedly, which makes me wonder a little bit like what's going on there.
Oh, Chrome is so heavy on your CPU.
It really, really is. We used to say the same thing about Internet Explorer, or that kind of got deprecated. So here's what I'm going to do in the background. I'm actually going to close Chrome. It's probably good that I'm not looking at my work email right now. And that's just going to free up a bunch of memory as it is. The other thing I'm noticing is my preview is open. That can close also. And folks, one of the reasons I'm closing unnecessary apps here is if you're on a small footprint for memory, and a lot of new M chips, come on systems with only 8 gigs of RAM, right? It's wise. I'm on 16 with this machine, but you can see you can still have problems. I'm also running Zoom and screen recording at the same time, so I don't know what. We can blame it on Zoom too. I think Zoom is a very bloated product as well. Let's try that maneuver again. So practice makes perfect. Control drag. And this will be called top segmented control. Just make sure my spelling is good there. And there it is. Then we'll find the bottom one here and control drag that right below it. And we'll call that bottom segmented, oops, no spaces, control. Another, propensity in modern programming, but I think it's becoming really pervasive in Swift now from what I'm seeing, is to be very verbose in how you're naming things, sticking with the convention of, proper camel casing so you can easily read it, um, so that there's no guessing like what thing you're looking at, that what it's attributed to. So just keep remembering that. We want to do the same thing for the labels. So I'm going to add a little bit more space here, and we're going to drag now from the top label, which is at the bottom of my thing, and the bottom label, which is above it. I'm actually going to move mine up in the outline. It doesn't really matter too much, right? But to me, it's just better to look at it that way. If I'm looking for it, I can find it faster. So let's start with the top one, control drag. And we're going to call this top caption label. And then we're going to do bottom caption label.
I have a question really quick. So
Sure.
I accidentally control clicked over the wrong thing and labeled the label as bottom segmented control. And I know we had some issues last time when just like deleting that because it would still cause some, it was still connected. Was
My
there a way to,
recommendation is to control Z your way out of it.
oh,
Or excuse me, command Z. Right. Got to remember what platform we're on here. Yeah,
okay, there we
yeah,
go.
just go backwards and then just redo it is probably easier than trying to fix it.
Yep.
Not that
We
it's
will
not
not.
entirely fixable, but for whatever reason, whenever you create these outlets, they register into the project. And if you try like at this point, like changing the code or breaking the connection and reforming it becomes really difficult because it tries somewhere in the background, things are attaching to each other and they register within the project on a project level. And those are really hard to fix in the aftermath. Um, Now, what I'm going to do, and this is just me being, I guess type A personality or something, I like to tighten my stuff up, so the code's nice and concise here. So I'm getting rid of the extra spaces in between the outlets. Not really necessary, but I think it just looks better. So I think that looks much better than it did before.
One second. I'm having some issues here.
Sure thing. I'm going to actually pause the recording, Jonathan.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right, we took care of a few issues here and got everybody caught up, and now we're going to press forward. And now we're going to begin working on part 3 of this app, which is entitled Modeling Your Data. Um, and it says basically the app has one basic component that powers its behavior, the choice the user makes about the captions. Each choice is represented by an emoji for the segmented control and some words for the label, right? So in order to do this, of course, we have to create a data model that's going to allow this all to happen. So we're going to define a struct called caption option to represent each possible choice. So we're going to add a brand new file to the program to do this. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to come up here. We're going to go File, New, File. It is going to be a Swift file. Let's see, they want us to name it caption option. So caption option. Once you're ready, go ahead and click create. And there's our new file, which of course came up on my second screen here.
So, can you repeat that what you just did right there, quick?
Sure. File new, file, Swift file,
Okay.
and then name it and hit create.
There we go.
Yep. And yeah, you know what? Don't feel bad. When I was in training, the teacher would do it like super fast, and I'd be like, "What did you just do?" He was very gracious though about keeping us caught up, by the way. All right. So now that we have the file, it's basically just a blank file. We do have the import foundation to give us most of the basic Swift features here. And we're going to define a new struct that will have properties. So we use struct. We want to name the struct caption. And then we want to have two properties. The emoji used to represent the caption and then the caption itself. All right. So this is where I feel like I need to do a little bit of review because I'm like, what do I do here? I'm real frank, right? And this is, one of the reasons why it's good to step backwards a little bit and kind of review how you do this. So we need two properties. So one would be the emoji to represent the caption, and then the caption itself. All right, so then we're going to need to define those. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pause for just a second. I just had to review the syntax on this, real frankly, folks. So first, we're going to create one. We're going to make this a let, and we'll call the first one emoji. That's going to be of type string. And then we'll also have one for the caption, also of type string. And just to kind of refresh what we're doing here, a struct is kind of a way to set up a way to store your data without actually assigning any data to it, right? But we are declaring what type it will be when it is declared, right? And if you remember, the words, that's a string. Emojis really are strings also. Right. There's no other functional work that we need to do in there. And so that one we can pretty much close and forget if you want. If you want to keep it open, that's fine too, but you can close it if you wish. All right, so now it's asking us to create two arrays inside the view controller, and one to represent the top choices and one to represent the bottom choices. Each array should contain caption option instances matching the ideas you came up with at the start of the project, and then name the arrays top choices and bottom choices. So we're going to kind of look at both of those. So just give me a second here. I'm just making sure that I get my syntax right. So I'm using cheat sheets at this point, which means another laptop right next to me to make sure I don't screw this up. All right, so this is going to be kind of a mechanical procedure here. So what I'm going to do is I am going to maximize my code window here. So we're going to do all this coding over here. I am going to do what we did when I learned it, and that is I am going to create a mark here just to kind of keep the stuff organized. Spell it. This will be called instance properties. And I see I misspelled mark, so not a big deal. Fix that. All right. And we're going to do lets on both of these. So the first one's going to be let top choices equal. And this is going to be an array. And what I'm going to do basically is I'm going to get my opening square bracket, press enter, and then give myself a couple of blank lines here. And then I'm going to make an instance of that struct. So I'm going to call in caption option, and then notice how it finds it, right? And now it's going to ask us for an emoji and a caption. And so now we need to pick an emoji. And as I'm looking at my screen here, I'm trying to think about what I'm looking back at the book here, what icons they use or they wanted us to use at the beginning. Um,
I think one was a monkey. I think sunglasses.
yeah, one was animals, one was other objects. So the first one was sunglasses, explosion, and hearts. Is what it is. So you can just follow along basically. Um, so and then I put in my double quotes, but here's the thing: you can hit that function key on the keyboard, and you can search that, which is kind of nice. There's the sunglasses. All right, you guys saw how I did that? And then I'm going to hit my tab key to come over to this next highlight here, put in my double quotes again. And what we did last time, and I'm just following the authors, what's cool? Question mark. And then outside of the parenthesis, when you're done with it, put in a comma, and then we're just going to repeat this a couple of times. So here's the second one coming. And then this time I'm going to put in, I think it was the explosion. There it is. And the string on that one will be, what makes me mad. Once again, outside the parenthesis, a comma. And we'll put in our third and final array item. Another caption option, emoji in the caption. The last icon here is hearts. A gazillion of them in here, but this is the one that they used in the book, these two little ones. And then another string here, and this one will say, what I love. Right. So you can see that the icons kind of correlate to the feeling, right? So cool, mad, and love. All right. You can, like I said, you could add more to this if you wanted. That wouldn't be difficult to do. All right. So that's the first one. We're going to do this.
Really quick.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having some issues where it says it can't find those emojis in scope.
Huh.
Okay. Well, here's the first place to look. Make sure that your caption option file is in the same project. That helps, right? But make sure that you've got the syntax right here, that the way that you're titling it, caption option, is the name of your struct matching the name of your file.
Yes.
Okay. And you have emoji and caption set up as strings like this?
Yes.
Okay. All your spelling is correct?
Yeah, I used the autocomplete for that. So that should be good.
All right. I think maybe what would be good at this point then is let's take a look at your screen. Yeah, if you don't mind sharing, let me pause the recording. So we took a little pause there to try to figure out the problem. What one of us had done is we did not put quotes around the emojis, and then if you look at the error that generates, and I do have to leave the line, it says basically that it can't find it in scope, meaning it's not finding this like weird emoji thing. And there's no auto fix offered for it, which actually surprises me because it seems like a pretty basic one. But emojis are strings. They're just weird strings, they're colorful or image strings, but whatever, they are strings technically in terms of coding. All right, let's let's build another one of these. We're going to follow the same exact format. And I'm just going to tell you, this is the way that I would do it. I would just replicate the whole thing. Of course, it won't like the fact that it's got the same name. So you can change that to bottom choices and then just update all the content. I think it's easier than redoing all of it. What we're looking for is a cat, a dog, and a monkey. So I'll start with the emojis first. So the old one, I'll start with cat, and I think this is the one we use. You can use any of the cats really, but I think I'm going to use this one. Whatever. And then we need a dog of some sort. So I'm going to hit function, and then I'm just going to do a search. Dog. Look at all those dog choices. This one kind of looks like my dog, so I'm going to choose that one. And then a monkey. Function, searching for monkey. Oh, hey, there's even gorillas. But I think I'm going to go with the one that they're using, which is that one. All right, and then we just want to update the words on the first one. And really, folks, you could come up with your own little punchlines here, but this is what the author is doing. Cats wearing hats. Dogs carrying logs. Or monkeys being funky. So now, just keep in mind too, right? We could very easily expand these significantly. So you could have like 5 choices or 10 choices or whatever, and then come up with I mean, it's on you, right? Like you could come up with a bunch of different things, but it gives you an idea of how this stuff operates. All right, then I'm trying to get back to where we were in the. Okay, so that was part 3, modeling the data, defining the custom types, which we did, and creating the choices. Now we made the 2 arrays. I just want to make sure we're not missing any of the top choices, bottom choices. I think we're all good. So we got 2 arrays filled with caption option structs, right? All right. So now we're moving on to part 4, which is to configure the UI. And now basically what we need to do is we want to write code to control all this stuff and make stuff happen on the screen. But I want you to think about like this procedure that we just went through. And this is a really common procedure in app building. First thing is you have to have a plan as to what you're going to build, right? So we talked about that right when we started. So it reinforces that concept of like pseudocoding, flow charting, storyboarding, whatever your process is for like coming up with the idea, to get that in place first. The next thing that happened is we worked on the user interface. We actually put the visual elements onto the storyboard, the labels, the segmented controllers, the image views. We found an image to work with, etc. So user interface came next. So we planned, then the user interface. Then we built the data model, which was a very simple struct, but still it's data that's going to feed the application. And now we're going to go into writing the code. And isn't it interesting, because you think of it as all as like, I'm going to code, but a lot of it is those other steps. And really what we're doing is we're falling into not exactly what I call the model view controller approach, but it's sort of, where we kind of, the view being the interface, the model being the information fed into it, and then the controller being the part that makes the actions happen. So that's where we're at now, right? And that's usually the most challenging part of building an app, is getting that code to work right. All right. So reading here in part 4 under a section called configuring the segmented controls, it makes sense to configure the segmented controls in code rather than via the interface builder, because the details of the configuration will come from the caption option instances that we've just created, and those aren't available in the interface builder. That's kind of the point. So all right, so each one of these arrays, and I just want you to think about that, right? You know, this is position 0, this is position 1, this is position 2, right? We talked about that. But now we also have to have them feed into these segmented controls, so those have the same amount of indexed array items also, right? And all those array things are going to start at 0, and then we can run loops to propagate the array to fill the segmented control. So if you guys feel where I'm going with that, right? So we have an array structure, it's going to feed into an array structure, and whenever you're doing a mechanically repeating process, you know, a loop is the tool you want to use. All right, so a lot of this configuration is going to happen inside of the view did load, by the way. It says first inside the view did load is we're going to tweak what the segmented control does automatically. And that is we're going to remove all the stuff that's already put there by dragging and dropping it in. So I'm going to call the top one. So I'm going to call the top caption segment control dot, and we're going to call in a method here called remove all segments. So if there's something there, it's going away. That's the first thing we do. Right. And really what it's doing is it's getting rid of the defaults. Then we're going to add the segments using this command. So we're going to say insert and you see I'm pausing here because I'm reading the instructions and they're not making sense to me. Real frankly, it says, you added the segments using the insert segment. This has 3 parameters. I don't see that we added that at any point. So I'm going to look at my reference here because I do have a completed version and I want to see what they mean by it. Oh, I see. Okay. So insert segment is a method that we're going to attach to segmented control. So in other words, let me back up here a second. So we're going to say top segmented control dot insert segment, and we want to use the one with title at animated. So the one I have selected right now. So make sure you choose that one. Right. And, you know, I'm kind of doing this backwards because this really needs to be inside of a loop. And so I'm going to let it throw some errors right now, and I'm going to set up my loop. So I'm going to say for choice in, careful here, top choices, the array that we created. So it's going to automatically loop through. And then the statement that I just typed up, I'm going to cut that, paste it inside here, and now I'm going to propagate all the information. So with this first UI image, you notice how it has that question mark in there. We haven't really talked about that a lot, but that becomes very pertinent in future versions of this course. And what I'm seeing here is this is not matching up. I don't have the right version of this. I'm actually going to delete the parenthetical phrase that follows and retype this. And I really want with title at animated. So I chose this one, but we want with title. So it's the third one. And now we're going to drop in here. So the title is going to be choice dot emoji. the at's going to be top choices dot count. And then we're going to set animated to false. So it's not going to animate when it does it. It's just going to do it. All right. So that's your completed loop there. And for right now, I'm getting rid of the other windows because we're just typing code. So you can see it a little bit more clearly. You guys good?
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, I had a phone call coming through. I had to stop that.
All right.
Uh,
All right. So the next thing that we also want to do here is I'm just reading through the instructions here. All right. I'm looking at the whole statement. All right. So we got it all, the statement. Now it says because we've now removed all of the segments, the control no longer has a selected segment. So you can set this with the property selected segment index property. Okay, so that's a mouthful, and I'm not even sure I said it correctly. But let's add in the statement here. So we're going to say top segmented control dot selected segment index, and we're going to set that at 0. So in other words, we are going to take one of the things that we just put in there and select it as active. So it'll be the first emoji that will be active. I'm going to create a little space for myself here. Now, we did this with the top segment control, and we're going to repeat all the same steps with the bottom segment control. So see if you can do it without me coaching you. And I'll see if I can do the same. All right, so we'll start with remove. Then we're going to run our loop. Curly bracket, press return. We'll just do the same thing we did above. We're just using the other control, but same third insert segment. And then the stuff that goes inside is identical, I believe. Choice dot emoji. So this needs to be an integer, so it's going to be the bottom choices dot count, and the animated is false. And then finally, we'll do the same thing we did above. We will set the selected segment index to 0, so it starts at the first one. All right. So once you have this stuff in place, they're suggesting that we actually do a build on it. So I'm going to run and build and make sure nothing crashes, basically. So here's my run. See if my build succeeds. Thankfully, it did. My simulator is launching, I think. It's probably in the background. There it is. And there we go. So still says top and bottom, but you notice how we do have the emojis in the segmented controls across the top and across the bottom, and that the first one is the one highlighted. That's really what we're looking for. All right, so we contended with a couple different problems here. and we fixed all of them, fortunately. But I'm going to go back to the view controller here and do the next step, basically. The other thing that it says here is you need to have a method that's going to set the correct captions based on the selection from each segmented control. So when I run the thing and I click on the dog or the cat or the monkey, that the text on the screen updates to go with it. And we're going to use the index values to help do that. I think we already mentioned that. And we're going to add a new method, basically. And what should I call that method? Once again, I'm looking at my old solution here. I think we just called it update captions, is what we did. So let's go ahead and start coding this. And what I'm going to do now is down here below the view did load, I'm going to add a couple different things. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark a couple of sections in my document. Even though this isn't the thing I'm doing right now, I'm going to put in a mark, and I'm going to call this mark IB actions for the actions we're going to add. And then I'm going to create another mark that's going to be called instance methods, or, basically the functions we're going to write to do the work. Hopefully spell that correctly. All right. And the primary one that we're going to create here is we're just going to call this update captions, right? Because that's what it's going to do. So we're going to call it a func, and we'll name it update captions, open parentheses, open curly brace, press enter. Automatically creates your second one. All right. So we're going to say here, let our top index. And I like how they do this in the book. They just give you kind of like a suggestion on how to do it, but they don't really tell you a lot more, right? So there's a little bit of extrapolation that happens, which is why you guys are lucky to have me here guiding you with the answers by my side. So the top segmented control, we are going to do a dot selected segment index. So whatever index value of the one that's currently selected, that's going to feed into this. I want to call it a variable. We're going to go into this constant, right? The top index. Then we're going to take the top caption label, its text. So we're going to say dot text equals the top choices, square brackets because we're dealing with an array, whatever the top index value is that we chose, and feed that into the caption. Now, as you can imagine, that's how you do the top one, right? And the bottom one is going to be really, really similar. So you could just retype it, or you can be super clever like me and paste, copy, paste. And then just change all the words that say top to bottom. And so I'm going to do that. It doesn't like it yet, but it will like it soon. There's bottom, bottom, another one, a couple more. Like so. Okay. Now, we created this function, but I always have to remember this. You can create a function, but it's not going to do a darn thing until you call it to run. So the logical place, at least initially, to call it from is from the view did load. So we have these, setups here for the segmented controls. And now we're just going to add right here at the bottom, update captions. Right. So this is, a matter of the program runs. It sets up the controls, puts the emojis in there, selects the first one, and then we're going to update the captions now to read into, the caption option array, right, and match up the emoji to the text, and then put it on the screen. So let's. If you haven't stopped running it from the last, I never stopped running it, so I have to stop first, and now I'm going to run it. So it's asking me to build and run in the instructions. And now notice the first icon is selected, and the words that go with are in there. Pretty slick, right? Rather than top and bottom, now we have something that makes sense. What's cool? Cats wearing hats, very, very cool. Now, if I do click on the other emojis, the highlight changes, right? But the code's not changing, right? So that's our next step, right? That's our next logical piece. All right, so let's go ahead and stop this from running. All right, so I'm reading from the teacher's manual here. So we're going into part 5 now, entitled Positioning the Captions. And it says, memes of this form don't always have text in the same fixed locations. In this part, you'll add touch interaction to the labels, allowing the user to position them exactly where they want. That's kind of an interesting thought. I didn't even think about that one myself. You just, right. So it types out these words, who says they have to be in a certain spot. And then there is this whole system that we do here called callbacks, where we individually process each individual touch reaction on the screen. And you know what? They're making the point here. It says, but using it requires quite a bit of nuanced code. For common interactions, you can use gesture recognizers instead. That's kind of the point. They're built on top of the same touch processing system, but they provide an abstraction layer to present you with simple information about gestures such as tapping, swiping, and pinching. All right, so for this Meme Maker app, we're going to use a thing called the UI Pan Gesture Recognizer, that's a mouthful, which tracks the state of a gesture as the user drags their finger around the screen. Okay, so we're going to open up our storyboard here. So I'm going to go back to the main here, and I'm trying to, I lost my place in the text. Open your storyboard. This is by default, views that aren't usually intended for user actions, such as labels, are completely invisible to touch. Enable user interaction for both of your labels by using the attributes inspector. In the view section is where you're going to find it. So right now I have top is highlighted, right? And we're looking for, what was that called again? Enable user interaction.
Oh, I see it. It's below view. There it is.
Right here, yeah. It's just a checkbox. All right. And then I'm going to click on the bottom label and do the same thing. Then I'm just going to verify that it's stuck on both. All right, so that's the way we enable user interaction. Now we're going to add the recognizer. So we're going to find in the object library here a thing called the, I just had the name up on the screen. It's called a pan gesture recognizer. That's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is.
Right. I'm doing this other thing too, and I didn't realize I've been doing this whole session here today on battery so far, and this is after coming back from training in Arizona. So I got to get my power plugged in here before I Not that I'm like at risk of running out, but it may as well like have full steam here as well. All right. So let's do that. I'm going to go up to the object library. All right. So whichever label that you're attaching to, I'm going to do the top one first, make sure it's highlighted first, and then drop the recognizer. All right. So let's just give that a try. So we're going to call this pan gesture recognizer. And I think it did it. I'm pretty sure it did it. But now I have the bottom label set, and I'm going to do the same thing. Yeah, it's giving me a little message here in the teacher's book. It says a gesture recognizer is associated with one view in the scene. If it's connected to the image view or to the top level view for the whole screen, your app won't work properly. All right, so I guess we're about to find out. I'm really tempted to Command C those. Okay, so I Command Z both of them because I wasn't sure on the first one if I actually hit it right. So I'm going to try that again. So I'm going to try. Okay, selecting the bottom label, doing the same thing. I think I'm okay. It's just being safe. All right. So the nice thing about these is these are going to use IB actions basically to communicate stuff to your code. So we are going to have to do a little IB action creation. And if you have your view controller on two separate, panels here, that's great. Otherwise, what I'm going to do is I'm going to option click view controller and open it up in the other view, and then kind of slide my interface over a little bit so I can do the dragging. I am going to be dropping stuff here in the IB actions area. And what they're recommending, and I'm going to kind of do it like this, I'm going to option click main. And actually, I want to be here. I'm going to option click it to open it up in the other view. And I'm going to go the other direction because I think that's going to make it's going to be easier, I think, to grab it from the outline and move it over than it's going to be to do it from the interface. Because are you dragging the label? Or are you dragging the controller? I mean, it's not very clear, but we want to do it with these things. So it says, okay, so you can't drag it from the scene, it says. So yeah, so that makes a whole lot of sense. All right, so let's do the drag. So I'm going to do a control drag to IB actions. This is an action that we're creating. And let's see, what name do we want to name this here? And actually, I'm going to cancel out of this for just a second. I'm just wondering if I need to maybe rename it here first. Nope, I don't think so. All right, one more time. Control drag over. And I'm trying, I'm looking at my previous because it's telling me to rename it. I'm not seeing a spot to rename it. But anyhow, I'm just going to go ahead and do the action here. So I apologize for kind of fumbling on this. But yeah, it's an action. And the name, we're going to call this, because that was the top one. I see, and this is where I'm getting a little confused because it's called, all right, I'm going to cancel out one more time. I wonder if I can rename this here. I should maybe be able to. Oh, sure enough. Okay, so they want me to rename it top, right?
Yeah, top caption, pan gesture.
Just the same way you would rename a file. So then the other one, um, bottom, makes sense. All right, now let's try it again. Control drag. Let's start with the top one. So it's going to be an action, the view controller, and the name's going to be drag top label. And then the bottom thing here, make sure that you switch it from any to UI pan gesture recognizer and then hit connect. All right, that's good. It worked. Let's do the same thing with the bottom. Control drag over. This one's going to be called drag bottom label. Drag bottom label. And UI pan gesture recognizer. All right, so we have both of our actions set up now. All right, that was a little weird, right? But we got it. You guys good?
Yep.
All right. All right. So now we're going to go back to the view controller here, and we're going to type in some code to make this stuff happen. And I'm going to just expand that code window here. Just makes it a little easier to see. I'm going to put some space in between my curly brackets, and they do give us the code right in the book, so I'm typing it in right from there.
Oh shoot. Hold on, I got backtrack a little bit.
All right. Well, give me a second. We'll come right back to it.
Yeah.
And I'm just double checking my solution from before with the new code here. All right, so it seems like it's okay. And you know what? I could just copy and paste it from the book, but I'm building character by typing it in manually. So we're going to start by saying if sender dot state is equivalent to, that's a double equal sign, dot changed. In other words, you're clicking and you're dragging. And you tap and you drag across the screen. That creates that event. Then open curly brackets, close curly brackets. Then we're going to say top caption label dot center. So we're going to change its position, is going to be from the sender dot location in where the view. So that's kind of the code there. Oh, and you see how I misspelled this, right? I didn't change it, I changed it.
I forgot about that one.
Yeah, there we go. So that's for that one. And you can imagine that the other one's going to be basically identical with changing it for the bottom, right? So we can just copy that code, paste it in, and then just change here to say bottom caption label. All right. So now they want us to once again do a build and run. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to run it. Hopefully we get a build succeeded. All right. So how fast that came up on the screen this time, which is great. And what we just created, first of all, our text still isn't changing, right? We're not to that part yet, but we've created the ability now to move that text. And notice I'm doing it with my mouse, right? So I'm clicking, holding, and dragging. And you see how it actually does allow me to change the position of the text, which is pretty darn cool. So if you have like an image where, there's something you don't want to cover up or whatever, you have the capability to move it around. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the app from running. Let's go ahead and let's take a quick little break, if you guys don't mind. Let's do a 5-minute break. So I'm going to pause the recording. All right, folks, we're back from our break, and we have another little snippet of code that we need to add to make all the magic happen. And I'll be real frank, I think I skipped over the instruction for it because, in the teacher's manual, they don't necessarily like go, give you a step by step of what to do. I mean, they sort of do, but if you skip over reading something really carefully, you can miss the code that you need to make something special happen, and that's exactly what I did. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come over here, and we're going to add another IB action, and I'm going to do this carefully, frankly, and I'm going to try to find the spot where this was added in. And I think it's back in part 4, for those of you that are keeping track of where this stuff is. Okay, because we have all the outlets in place. Yeah, I still don't see where they actually did it in the instructions. It's really interesting. All right, so I'm just gonna I'm just gonna do it here, but we are gonna have an IB action function, and what I'm looking for really is the instruction for how to pull it in, because one thing that we've done when we write, okay, so I'm going to get my mouse over here on the screen so you guys can see it, but when we write code like this, right, and we have these little connections that happen, these connections happen, and if you are in split screen view, and I'm just going to show you this here, so I'm going to option click this over to the other. Oh, it's already open. All right.
Quick question.
There
Are
we
we
go.
recording?
We are recording. Yes, we are.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So like when we're creating these outlets, right? So I want you to notice that if I'm like clicking here or here, and notice how as I click on this, the stuff highlights over here in the storyboard, but not on the labels, right? We added those pan gesture things to the labels, but they're not like really screen items that we can necessarily manipulate. So what they end up doing is when you put in these little connections, they end up here in this little title bar, or for lack of a better description. Now, the other one that we're about to add, and I'm trying to get it up on my screen here, so I apologize if I'm fumbling a little bit, but I want to make sure that we do this correctly. So I'm going to open up my previous version of this project. And what I'm looking for is how the connection is made, and do we just drag and drop it in? So basically, we're going to write code that looks for either of the two segment controllers to have a change in them, and then to trigger the change in the text correspondingly. In other words, it will trigger that update captions function at the bottom. Right now, update captions is only grabbing the first emoji from each area and putting that text on the screen. And so we're missing that other piece. So what I'm going to do now is try to figure out where it's connecting to. And so I have all my controllers and stuff. And this is on a different screen now. And okay. And it looks like it's connected to 2 items. So I'm going to see if I can make that both of them happen. And I'm looking at the connections inspector here too. Okay, so those are fine as well. All right, so let me see if I can replicate what I've done previously here. So what we're going to do is in this view controller here, I'm going to select both. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm just so I can make sure I'm grabbing the right things. I'm going to highlight top segmented control and bottom segmented control. I'm holding down the command key to highlight both of them. Right. Now I'm going to control drag, and I want to make sure I have nothing highlighted over here. I'm going to control drag from here to here. And notice how this is a little more complicated interface. What I called it last time was segmented control changed. So segmented control, excuse me. Thank you. Changed. The sender will be any. The event will be value changed, right? So we're just clicking on a different item in there. And arguments are sender. Okay, so that should all be fine. I'm just going to let that create sender any. Okay, so we're all good. And then we just need to add to this the code that makes magic happen, which is just to call the update captions function that we already created. But the trick on this one is that we want it to apply to both controllers, or excuse me, both controls, not controllers, controls, right? And so highlighting both of those and pulling it over. So in other words, we're looking for a change in both of those, right? And then once a change happens, you run the function, it comes down here, it looks at this code, and depending on which one changed, it will update the text based on which emoji is selected. All right, so now the proof is in the pudding. Let's see if it actually works. So I'm running my build here. There, it's up on the screen. The first one's loading like it's supposed to. Now let's change the top one. There it is changed. And now my bottom one's not working. All right, so we still have an issue with this. So we got to figure out why only one of them is working. All right, so I'm going to pause the execution of the code. And now I'm going to do a little bit of troubleshooting here in terms of how that worked out. So what I'm doing here, and I'm using my previous version to make sure that I'm not making any mistakes. I mean, it looks the same to me. And so what I'm checking, so like what I'm doing on my other screen here, my other computer, is notice how, yeah, it's only highlighting the one of them. You notice that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's only highlighting one. So here's what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna, well, I want to remove it. So now I could just delete it. This is my caution here. Don't just delete it because it's still registered in the project. It's better to control Z your way back. And that should get rid of the connection. Now, just to be sure, right, I can check here to make sure. Okay, and I don't see that I have any connections there. Okay.
I still have a connection, and I Command Z. I don't know why I'm still getting it.
Well, I don't know if you caught the way that mine worked, but I had to control Z one more time than I thought to actually remove the little icon.
Yeah, I'm.
All right, I'm gonna pause the recording here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't.
No, no.
Do we just?
So the one thought that we're having here is since we can't seem to like connect both of them at the same time, that we could do it as two separate actions that would work, right? The intent is not to have it happen that way though. So I'm going to try a different approach. So I tried doing it from the document outline. So I think instead I'm going to do this. I'm going to click both of them here on the actual storyboard and then try my control drag over. So here comes. And what was our name on this again? It was segmented control changed. It is an action view controller. Ah, okay. I think this is the trick maybe, right? The type. What type is it? Right. I didn't do this setting last time. So UI segmented controller, value changed, and sender. So let's see if that, and in my brain, my brain is telling me it doesn't really matter who's sending it. So any would actually be okay, but maybe this is more correct, So uh, let's try it. Okay, so let me just put update captions in there. When I hover, it is it's only selecting the one. Oh no, that's a top pan gesture recognizer as opposed to okay. So that's okay, I think. Oh, okay. So I think I just broke my code horribly here. So I'm control Zing again. Here's what I noticed. I ended up breaking this connection in the process of adding the other one. So the workaround for that, of course, I'm just going to create more space and then I can clear the space later. So over here, I still have this one and this one selected. So it's a command click on both of those. And now I'm going to do a control drag over. And this time we'll get it right, right?
We hope.
Right? We do hope. Segmented, control, changed. I don't think this really matters, but I'm going to select that. And then we'll add. So there's no connection now. I don't know if you guys are noticing that. And that's what we want it to do. But the connection is not happening, right? And I'm not liking it, by the way.
So it's so when we set up that action, um the type we change from any to UI segmented to control, or do we keep it as any?
I went with UI segmented control, but any really should work.
Okay.
Because it really is the segmented control that's doing it. But in my previous version, I chose any and it was okay. The problem is with the connection, right? And so fortunately, I have at least a sample I can look at here with the connections. So I'm seeing what appears for the top control. My top control seems okay. My bottom control, I'm checking this one here now, is not okay. Why is that not okay? And see, this is where this panel comes in handy, right? Because you notice this one's got the top segmented control with the view controller, right? That's
Right.
but when I switch to the bottom one, it's missing the value change. So it's not actually all right. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna control Z my way out again. I'm gonna do that here.
So if we need to break a connection that, that control Z wouldn't change or like doesn't fix, was going into that window that you were in, how you would break that connection to be able to reconnect it?
Yes, that is, that's kind of the point of that is it helps you to kind of solve some of those issues. Now, here's what I'm seeing is kind of interesting, right? And I think that's exactly what's going on here. So that one and this one have the referencing outlets are okay, right? It's this one that's failing. So I have a little bit of a theory here. So I think that basically I'm going to remove that one, right? And then try to do the maneuver again. So highlight both. Oops. Control drag. You get a lot of practice with this. I think, this is kind of simulates what I think what most people would run into when they're doing it on their own. I'll leave it as any this time. I think that's fine. Yeah, I think all that's fine. So here we go. And notice it's not creating the icon now.
Yeah, that's what I was getting to.
All right. All right. This is what in football, we would just punt at this point. That's how the Cowboys felt the other day. Gotta pick on those people a little bit, I guess.
Oh yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna kind of do the same thing here. So it seems like it's attaching to the first, it's not attaching to the second. Could I, and I don't think this is right, but yeah, what I really want to do, yeah, this is not what I really want to do here. So Control Z. Why? Is there a, I did not want to delete that. Okay, so we got that in there. All right. I'm gonna try a different approach because this is possible. And I guess the first thing I'm going to check here before I'm going to look at each one of my segmented controllers here because I think this is okay. And then I'm going to check my outlets up top here. And those all are fine. I'm going to try to type this in manually. This is not the typical way to do it. That's the polite way to say it. Underscore. This is what I did last time, or what I had from last time. The sender was any. And then my curlies. Oops. Spot. At least now I got the circle, right? And let's do update captions. All right, so that the code is correct. So now what I'm going to try to do is go the other direction and see, this is where I wish I had my mouse working. So if I attach it to that one, there it is. Now I wonder if I can do the same thing here. And this is where, real frankly, I like to have these like real close to each other. That's a really long drag, so I have to be strategic with my finger positioning on the touchpad. And then I'm also pulling it here. So now if I click here, oh, looks like I have it. Now, if I hover over that, okay, I have both of them. So, okay, so the trick on this one is seemingly create it with one and then drag from the little icon over to the other. All right, before you guys go making really drastic changes in your code, I'm going to go ahead and see if that works. Oh, hey, the top one was changing before, right? Now the bottom one's working too. So that was enough to do it. I'm going to stop the app from running. I'm going to pause the recording quick, make sure you guys are okay. All right, well, that seems to be the final piece here that we needed to make it all work. And I'm just going to call this a video. So this recording will stop here, and you can always go back and review. Hopefully you found this helpful. If not, find somebody else's video to help you there. I'm being a little snarky. All right, this recording ends here, folks.